right, everybody, welcome to this month's Investing in Identity Forum. I am your host today, Travis Dre, the founder CEO of Liminal. For those that aren't super familiar with us, we are a boutique strategy firm focused squarely on the digital identity, fintech, and cybersecurity space, typically focused on solving either growth strategy or go-to-market problems for businesses between kind of that Series C through public companies. So many private equity, venture-backed businesses in the space. What we do here, like I mentioned, we do advisory services, but we also do research and other industry engagement items. So if you want to talk to us about anything related to identity, fintech, cybersecurity, please do reach out to us. We'd love to nerd out with other folks interested in this topic. So great, jumping right into it. Got the typical cast and crew here. Like I mentioned, my name is Travis Dre. We're joined by Cameron D'Ambrosi, Managing Director, as well as Dave Fields, partner at PTB Ventures. What's going on, guys?
Ahoy.
Glad to be back.
Glad to be back.
Springtime.
It's springtime. Yeah. We didn't have a session in February, so we released that big reusable identity report and got, I think, a little bogged down. How are you feeling about the spring, Dave?
It's an interest. Usually springtime is hopeful, right? Although the world does not give us very many reasons for that these days. Mm-hmm. Markets turned around a little bit in the last week or so. It'll be interesting to find out if that's the proverbial dead cat bounce or an actual return to kind of where we were a year ago. I know we're going to get into a couple of the deals here pretty soon. But it's certainly an interesting time for identity companies and M&A, as we're going to see, given some of the dynamics around valuations are now, down, broadly speaking, anywhere from 25 to 50%. Some software companies are down even more than that. And you have big cash piles at some of the larger tech companies or some of the more mature tech companies. So it certainly makes for some interesting market dynamics.
Yeah. There's nothing like coming out of winter into a very interesting market. I mean, we talk about this a lot, and as a business at Liminal, we get to do a lot of commercial due diligence and growth strategies where we're thinking about that build buy partner decision. A lot of that's rooted in the capital markets. And if you're listening to this and you're saying, I hope these guys have all the answers, we're going to go ahead and apologize, because it is a very confusing time, and hopefully we'll make some sense of some of these deals here. But I think we're all a bit of a passenger right now on this train. So with that, let's go ahead and introduce some of the notable deals. So we had actually a whole bunch lined up to talk about today, but we're recording this here on March 25th. So a couple big deals this week that really, I think, shaped this conversation today. The first one being Mitek and Hooyu, about $130 million cash deal for Mitek buying Hooyu, which is the UK firm. Very, very interesting. Mitek's market cap yesterday morning was around 630 million. And I think ended around 645, 650. So the market probably didn't really know how to react to it, this particular deal, and very expensive deal. And we're going to talk about that here in a minute. The second big deal that we want to talk about was Avast acquiring SecureKey. Avast, part of that largest cybersecurity deal ever with NortonLifeLock, a little bit stalled with the UK regulators, and but we expect that to probably continue to go forward. But Avast continuing to march downfield, making acquisitions in the space, since they brought on Charlie Walton, formerly the CEO of SecureKey and general manager of the MasterCard identity program. So this acquisition, very, very interesting, pretty telling for what Avast is trying to accomplish with this one on the heels of Evernym. So we'll dig into that one here momentarily. And then Google and Mandiant. So one that didn't happen this week, but one that's definitely worth calling out. And Dave, want to kick it back over to you. Obviously, you're talking about large cash balance sheets, interesting market dynamics right now. What are your thoughts on, what's your thoughts on this deal?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, Mandiant's an interesting company, right? It was, Mandiant was a consulting and services business. I think it was bought over a decade ago by a company which was called FireEye. FireEye subsequently had a data breach, and it's gone through a couple different iterations. I think the stock was down like 80–90% at one point. And then they sold off a big chunk of their product portfolio to McAfee, I think last year. And so there was always something kind of in the works with Mandiant. So it's not surprising to see them bought, but I mean, this is exactly kind of the type of acquisition that I think we're going to start to see more of in the next couple of years. Also for Google, expanding into cybersecurity, they don't really have to worry about, it's not ad tech or anything that's really consumer related, where there's a lot more like antitrust concerns. It's not that, Google's not particularly, well, they don't have as dominant a position as say Amazon or Microsoft in cloud, or some of those services, but they're now moving much more in the, this is more of it on the enterprise side of the house versus the consumer, where I think any acquisition they made would be heavily, heavily scrutinized right now. Like if they were to try to, anyway, yeah. So, this is exactly, they've got a big cash pile. So I would expect to see Google, Microsoft, to be very acquisitive probably over the next 24 months. Now that, as I think I said in the preamble ramble, software multiples have basically been cut in half, on a price to sales, whether you're looking at forward or trailing, most price to sales multiples have been basically cut in half in this drawdown in the NASDAQ. Maybe they've rebounded a little bit, but that means that there's probably some companies out there that are growing, that fill out some, that are in very strong, compelling markets. And we'll start to see, Google and Microsoft making these acquisitions that are in that sort of single digit billions, maybe even to the, into the teens. I mean, obviously we've already seen Microsoft, sorry, the gaming company's escaping me right now. Activision. So we're going to see, I think, more acquisitions just like this in the next couple of years, and it'll be interesting to see who gets bought in the identity industry, particularly now that the IPO activity is probably closed. The IPO window is probably closed for the next 12 months and potentially longer, depending on where we go. So I would certainly expect more multi-billion-dollar acquisitions this calendar year.
Yeah, and just to kind of note, this is the second largest deal Google's ever made after buying Motorola in 2012. So, and third was Nest. So, I mean, this is pretty significant for Google, just generally speaking. Obviously, making a big stand on this one. Google not necessarily leading the pack in terms of cybersecurity against those other peers that you're talking about. So I think this is, to me, a very smart move. I know that, if you read dark reading and everywhere else, I think it's pretty polarizing in terms of how some of the analysts are looking at this deal in terms of if this was a good idea for Google or not, but definitely seems like, on the right path. Cameron, I mean, do you have any, I don't know if you have any additional thoughts on the Google Mandiant acquisition here, or what it means for cybersecurity, generally speaking?
Yeah, I think what it means to me is we're going to continue to see digital identity being pulled towards the cybersecurity space. Like we have cybersecurity kind of on the edge of our map. But I think when you think about how companies are approaching this cybersecurity space, they're looking for deeper integration into cloud, into CIAM and IAM. And I would expect to see that's where Google is kind of bringing the skills and tools of the Mandiant team to bear, is rolling more of this cybersecurity posture into, their identity stack more broadly.
Yeah, and just to throw out some other names here, we drafted down. We're kind of assessing this deal. We think other big M&A candidates in the cybersecurity space that stand out: Tenable, CyberArk, Rapid7, SailPoint, and Ping as really interesting, also additional cybersecurity businesses that seem to kind of fit a very similar profile from the Mandiant side. Well, let's go ahead and move on. Would love for our audience to, if you have some thoughts on any of these deals, especially ones that we don't really talk about a lot, similar to these cybersecurity deals like Mandiant. Love to hear your thoughts on it. Just reaching out to liminal.co. Would love to definitely have a dialogue about it. But moving forward into our more typical domain, Mitek and Hooyu, obviously one that I think caught several folks by surprise, but it was banked by Jefferies and GP Bullhound. So very clearly this was a process. Mitek has already gone through not just the press release, but getting on the phone, talking to folks. You heard about some of those capabilities. It seemed like this was largely driven by Houyu's capabilities, but also their own position with orchestration. So if you had that on your bingo card, you can go ahead and hit that for the 10th time in the past 14 months or so. These platforming companies like Mitek very much needing these central capabilities like orchestration. So makes a lot of sense here. You can see on the landscape some of the current solutions that Mitek already had are in that blue color. So authentication, biometrics, proofing, verification, and document verification, with some new solutions from Hooyu bringing in. So mobile identity device intelligence and identity wallets. From the identity wallets piece, this is more related to, I think, how Hooyu was previously well positioned around owning your own data, be able to go and capture or be able to retrieve that information about you. I believe they still have that product offering available to all of the different customers. So wanted to kind of highlight that here, but it does seem like more so that the overlap is related to access to data, the UK market. Houyu's got a really good presence out in the UK, growing out in Europe. And these guys have obviously been clearly partners for quite some time. Dave, when you see something like this, we've talked about platforming businesses quite a bit, right? We saw Jumio with Fourstop. We saw HelloFlow and Trulioo. Now we see Mitek, Hooyu. As an investor, how are you kind of assessing some of these acquisitions and some of these platform IDV KYC businesses and how they're growing and what this kind of means for you, especially as you evaluate other companies in the space?
Right. So, the important thing to recognize with, these platform businesses, right, is you're always looking for, you're looking at something where you have shared costs and a shared problem across a large set of companies, where it doesn't make sense for them to actually specialize in solving that problem themselves. And so you want to see those development costs effectively externalized into a vendor that can serve, an industry vertical. In this instance, probably, it's a lot of financial services, right? Probably some other regulated, maybe there's some healthcare and government services in there as well. So that's probably a part of why Mitek's buying this, right? Is to both buy into some of the markets in the UK where there's some special, somewhat specialized or slightly differentiated requirements, which is probably regulatory driven. And then also, if they have, capabilities that can then be channeled across their other kind of like customer base, right? And so right now you're seeing companies need to do a couple different things. One, everybody needs to have a certain amount of first party data or something that's specialized and unique themselves. But then they also need to make sure that they have all other capabilities or requirements or features covered, so that they don't become displaced or find out that what they've built their business on becomes outmoded, right? So one way to do that is to have an orchestration layer, so you can continue to have your specialized capabilities where you differentiate yourself, but then also be able to say, look, we can also, to some extent, our business isn't necessarily future-proof, but we'll be able to integrate and easily integrate with any other offering that you may find compelling down the road. And you're not going to then have to displace us as a vendor as a result, right? As a result of some other platform or capability emerging, right? So that's the type of analysis I do. I didn't catch it, but do you guys have an idea of what Houyu's revenue was, or do we? I think sometimes
we can guess. I think it's estimated, right?
Right.
You can guess between 18 and 24 million, roughly.
Okay. So they're bought somewhere around like 5-6 times, right? I think the thing that I was actually like, we've talked about some of the inside baseball or whatever on these acquisitions and headlines. And so one of the things that I thought was unique and worth calling out was they, 98 million pounds, right? And typically when we've talked about things that look like, usually when somebody's putting the deal price in there, it's because they really want it to be known. Somebody wants to be able to boast about it to a great deal. In this instance, 5 times, not the biggest exit. I mean, look, it's 100 to build a 100 million pound, $130 million business, like that's commendable, right? But typically this is kind of falling below the threshold of like where you would see venture-backed businesses putting the deal price in the headline. And in this instance, the reason it was is, as I think, Travis, you mentioned, Mitek's market cap is like $630 million. So this actually rises to a level of like materiality, rise to a materiality threshold where Mitek actually has to disclose this to their shareholders. If this were like Google, buying this would be like, 1/100th% of their market cap, or like something really de minimis. And then you wouldn't even see an acquisition like this, like the acquirer mentioning like the deal price. So I just thought I would like kind of like share that little tidbit, because obviously you see, with the next one, and I don't mean to like jump to the next one without giving Cameron his opportunity to chime in, but like, with the Avast SecureKey acquisition, and when they bought Evernym, we didn't see those deal prices being announced.
Right. No, I think that's actually really helpful. And just want to make sure that the audience knows that the estimated revenue is definitely estimated revenue. We have no, we have no insider knowledge of that.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't in any of the press releases. I Googled it, found a random like Dun & Bradstreet like page that estimated at like 15 million, so somewhere in the like, single digit, which means like, look, compared to where, so they were bought for like single digit, price to sales. I think we've all heard, how in the private markets, we've seen some IDV companies being, having private funding rounds, like growth funding rounds, where like 20, 50, even 100 times, right? So this was probably a company that, was growing, but growing modestly, and had been built to a point where, look, they weren't all of a sudden going to turn into a company that was growing 100%, year over year. And so it, that's a point where it probably makes sense to sell. And so, good for both Mitek and Hooyu for, figuring out how to create a win-win when, out of a situation like that. Good for them.
Cameron, not to squeeze you on time, we'll let you definitely cover more of the next one here. But what are your thoughts in a minute or so here?
A minute? I don't know about all that. No, look, I think, orchestration strikes again, right? This is something we've been calling out across multiple of these events that, we are seeing a ton of movement towards this orchestration mindset, and that for the platforms that don't have these capabilities, they either need to develop them or acquire them. And I think when you're looking at the past set of transactions around this space, whether it's Moody's and Passport, Trulioo and HelloFlow, Jumio and Fourstop, this is right in that same vein. And I think I would expect to see the other, more swallowable, if you will, companies that have these orchestration capabilities look to be targeted by acquirers sooner rather than later.
Yeah. I do wonder, and I am conscious of time here. We see a lot of new, there's a lot of innovation left in this space. There's a lot of companies that have not been started yet. And I just wonder how much more the market is willing to buy orchestration companies that have been created in the last couple of years, right? Or are currently in the startup founder phase. Just something to, something I'm mulling over here is, when does this capability become so ubiquitous, or something that can be replicated internally over a set amount of time that does not require an acquisition? So,
I mean, I think it depends on the, the end market that you're serving, right? I mean, I think there are certain, global banks which have built their own orchestration capabilities for different parts of identity. Maybe not always IDV, but potentially authentication or something on the authorization side. So I think there's a budgetary question in the end market, like which, are you serving like, middle market or mid-cap companies, or, who are you serving? But like, look, every orchestration is no longer like a novel concept. So I think if you're starting today with orchestration, you better be figuring out what else is differentiated. Is it the end market you're serving, like Africa, or what is it that's different? Because orchestration is pretty ubiquitous right now, whether it's in any part of the identity services stack, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. And, and I think that's worth noting because we do have a lot of founders that that follow this web series, and they reach out, and please do continue to reach out, everybody. But, I hear this a lot. Hey, I'm thinking about starting a company around orchestration. I say, well, I think, if I would have loved to have gotten this email in 2018, right? I would have invested in you. But let's keep moving on here. I know we're coming up on time. So the second deal here that we wanted to cover is Avast and SecureKey. Really appreciate Avast putting us in their press release under the liminal moniker. We do appreciate that with our reusable identity report. And if you've not already read our reusable identity report, I think that would answer a lot of questions about this acquisition and how we are viewing it. So I will go ahead and say that we have a much longer response to this that is in a written form, and you can check that out on the website yourself. So what we have here, what we know about Avast is they are very interested in consumer digital identity, right? They have over 400 million users. We've talked a lot about Avast in the past. We covered it with the Evernym acquisition a few months back. And I believe we even talked about it when they hired Charlie Walton to come in and lead this business unit. So they're clearly making the right steps. Andre, the CEO of Avast, is a nerd just like us on this digital identity front, knows his stuff super cold, and has a really strong vision for how Avast can play a significant role for consumer digital identity going forward. SecureKey makes a ton of sense in my mind for Avast. Clearly, when you think about building consumer digital identity, especially around reusable identity, you need a few things. We talk about this a lot: trust versus ubiquity. SecureKey has proven that they've been able to optimize both of those for specific communities as they've launched their verified.me product in multiple markets and seeing a lot of success in Canada. They built the framework to which people have begun to model when looking at how to deploy personal identity ecosystem style identity networks. So when you think about a company like Avast, to me, having both a company like Evernym, which is able to create verifiable credentials, with a company like SecureKey that have been proven to create identity networks, you combine that with a very large consumer base that already exists, 400 million users under Avast, you have yourself a really interesting opportunity for 400 million people to be connected into a trusted identity network with verifiable credentials, which seems like a strong story out of the gate. I'll stop talking there, but Cameron, since we cut you short on the last one, I'll kick it over to you to kind of give your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, look, I think where we understand that they want to play is exactly in this personal identity ecosystem space. Obviously, Avast has what we would consider to be maybe one of the most untapped pools of identities in the market today, with several 100 million active users of their platform. And I think when you combine what they've purchased with Evernym, and then think about what they're acquiring with SecureKey, the broad strokes really start taking shape in terms of where they feel they can combine that existing touch point they have with the frameworks and tools that allow them to bolt on a more meaningful set of identity attributes to those existing relationships between physical humans and their underlying devices they've already built with their, network of deployed cybersecurity products. So really excited to see where they take this next. I think, as Travis alluded, we remain extremely bullish directionally on this space. And, I think they have a good of a right to win as anyone else.
Yeah, Dave, kick it. I know we cut you off on the last one, actually. You're about to get into it a little bit.
No. I mean, look, I think the interesting thing to watch here is, so SecureKey, if you look at some of their product marketing language, kind of shifted away a little bit from emphasizing kind of blockchain and self-sovereign identity, right? Whereas, 2016, 2017, they were very big and heavy on being a sort of an SSI company. And, now they were working with, they were a big Hyperledger participant and et cetera, et cetera. But I think the interesting thing here is just, look, Avast just bought Evernym, now they bought SecureKey. So two companies that have been part of the decentralized identity or self-sovereign identity conversation for a very long time. So it's interesting to see a company that, like, just as you guys say, that has a very big user base. Clearly, I mean, I don't know what it is, but like clearly they've got, some sort of view about how decentralized identity and SSI is going to evolve, but also how you actually commercialize it, which has been, the struggle for most companies. I mean, I know SecureKey had, a big user base because of their relationship with the Canadian government, and then also the financial services, players in Canada, but didn't really push outside of Canada. But like, so it's going to be very interesting to watch. Like, if they make a third acquisition this year in the the decentralized identity space, I'll really be like impressed that somebody's taken a view of how to like roll up like decentralized identity players and turn it into something. Make rock soup, I guess. But who knows? Like, let's see what happens. Like, it's interesting. Like, yeah. I'm intrigued.
It is interesting. When I look at the landscape here, and, this is one of the areas that I think is super interesting, because you can say like, well, we love to see congruency on the landscape. And there's some spots here that are very clear, breaks. You have one specifically with the identity and access management bucket. If we have all these consumers, we have all these reusable identities, we can tie that quickly into a SIAM type of capability. So I expect to see something in customer IAM. Additionally to that, you're talking about financial institutions, you're talking about these identity networks. I think you can, start to think about identity proofing as an area that these guys can start to bolt on. And once you have strong enough network effects, fraud detection and prevention becomes a pretty clear opportunity for them. So if you're looking at this landscape and you're looking at where they're positioned, it looks all over the map if you kind of squint your eyes a little bit. But generally, you think about the consumers, you think about this large user base, you think about verifiable credentials, you think about the positions that SecureKey and Evernym had with governments and other trusted authorities like financial institutions. Very quickly, a few of these segments start to pop out. So I would not be surprised to see Avast make some either partnership announcements or some form of acquisitions in the SIAM and identity proofing space. That's where my money would be going for betting against that one. And with that, guys, we're gonna go ahead and move to kind of closing this one out here. I know we skipped February. Hopefully March made up for it. We've been very busy. We've produced some recent research. If you haven't already read it, the market opportunity for reusable identity and how to get there, a report in early February, which is it's the largest research report we've done here. It's a culmination of 5 years of working with hundreds of organizations trying to think about this problem statement. Many of the organizations we spoke about today, and what those problems have been so far and where we think that's going to go. And just one of those things. We do think private public partnerships will be a very big component here. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, definitely download that, read that opportunity landscape. And for our members, we've just published our latest outside in report on the crypto economy and its role in the digital identity ecosystem. If you are a member and listening to this, you obviously know about all of our research. If you are not an existing member, we publish regular outside in reports every couple of weeks where we dig into a topic that we want to nerd out on. Of course, we think it's very interesting, but we're also very interested to know what's interesting you guys, so we can pick out the right research topics to dig into. And if you're interested in membership, you can go ahead and reach out to us on our website directly to learn more about what that entails. And speaking of our website, we've recently improved it quite a bit by adding our digital identity landscape. So if you were watching this and saying, hey, that landscape you got on there looks pretty new and shiny, it is. We've released our latest landscape in February, and we've redone our website to include a deep dive into the digital identity landscape for 2022, a whole video series on how to read the landscape, what's new with that landscape, as well as a whole historical breakdown of our past landscapes. And you can kind of click through what all of those look like and what some of those shifts were over time, and read some of our blog content on our analysis of what was going on at the time. So quite an interesting resource, definitely to bookmark in your browser. And then last but not least, what to look forward to here at Liminal. We have our Liminal Summit coming up in early May. It is sold out, so probably shouldn't have told you guys. But if you don't know, now you know. If you are interested in joining us in person, it is an executive summit. We have 100 people, typically CEOs or the C-suite, and a bunch of investors. If you're interested in learning more about that for our next summit, you can go to our website and leave us a note, and we'll make sure you're added to our distribution list for more information as it comes out. And with that, I just want to go ahead and thank everybody for joining. Cameron, Dave, as always, good to hear your opinions on this interesting market. I'm sure we're going to have a whole bunch to talk about in April as this market gets even more interesting. Any final thoughts from you guys?
Yeah, check out the website. Obviously, I think the PIA's report is going to be even more critical to our perspective of the landscape as we move forward. So if you haven't given that a read, please do. And if you're going to be at the summit, excited to see you there. If you missed out, hopefully you can join us next year.
All right. Thanks, guys.